The End Times, the most dreadful series of events that have ever befallen the world of Warhammer Fantasy. But the tragedy of thousands is the joy of all 5 Age of Sigmar players, whatever. Consider this not just a simple lore video, but an eulogy for Warhammer Fantasy, and foreshadowing for Warhammer the Old World. Goodbye, Warhammer Fantasy, you were good to us. Welcome, Warhammer the Old World. These are your end times as well. To begin the story of the end times, we have to go back, before the times of Karl Franz, before the time of Magnus the Pious, when the old world was covered in ice and darkness. The only living beings on the planet being gigantic beasts fighting for supremacy of the warmest places. It wasn't a very pleasant place to live in, as you can imagine, but that all would change with the coming of the Old Ones, who through magic and technology, but that term kinda gets mixed when you get highly advanced as they were, they managed to reshape the world, creating races of all different forms to live on the planet. To give you some context, the Old Ones were supreme beings from whom magic and technology, as I said before, were the same thing. But that happens when you're so advanced. They ruled a vast empire that spawned across the great cosmos and the entirety of time. To reach parts of their gigantic empire, they used gateways, or gates, to travel from one spot to the other. Once on the world, they would build 2 of those gates at each of the planet's poles. They saw great potential in it and decided to use it. These gates would give them easy access and would secure a fast way to travel. And after that, they would start their work on reshaping the planet. By firstly, getting rid of the ice and moving it closer to the sun. And because of that, forests started to grow. The Old Ones would create the Slans to carry out their will, the Saurus to fight, and the Skinks to be technicians and low-level people. Unfortunately. Everything was looking good, but not really. Outside of the gateways, portals to another dimension appeared, and malign beings came from them to destroy the world of the Old Ones. Either by attack or pure accident, the gates of the Old Ones collapsed on themselves. Magic meteorites known as warpstone rained on the planet. It's thus mutating and maddening any creature that was close to it. The world felt every impact and every transformation. Chaos and its forces continued their advance in this time. Where once there was the Northern Gate, instead now there is a moon made entirely of warpstone, giving the world 2 moons. One normal and one look that shined with darkness, but not light. But that wasn't the only problem they faced. As the gates collapsed, that tore openings into reality. Openings that allowed the demons of chaos to maintain their physical form. The Old Ones would disappear at some point and nobody would know why, and it would fall to the Slans to close the portals. They would manage to do that at the cost of half of the numbers, all the Old Ones and the lizardmen becoming primitives, and 2 terrible wounds in the world appearing. But chaos was defeated. Kind of. For you see, in reality, the tears were not fully closed by the Slan, and so chaos and demons made their way on the world. The High Elves would create later on something known as the Great Vortex, thanks to some waystones forming an archipelago called the Island of Dead. This vortex drew in the magic of the Chaos Waste and stopped the advance of the demons, but not completely. Still, this was better than nothing, and for a time, everything seemed to work. Now you might wonder, how is this related to the end times? In a way it is, because it tells us how chaos came for the world and how it was pushed back. But of course, neither the Slan nor the High Elves managed to isolate the planet from the corruption of chaos. While demon incursions became rare, chaos and the winds of magic that came from the warp were still part of the world. With the polar gates collapsed, the north and the south poles became chaos-infested lands, filled with worshippers of the ruinous powers. In case of the North Pole, that gave us the Chaos Wastelands that we know today. In the case of the South Pole, it gave us Beast Fiends, beastmen that are more demon than man, and other atrocities. But Chaos always finds a way. The Chaos Gods twist and corrupt souls, and those corrupted would lead attacks upon the world to conquer it in the name of their dark, twisted masters. Be it Norscan raiders or beastmen, the world knows no peace. From time to time, the Chaos Gods would work against their own nature, and they would unite their forces by picking a champion of Chaos Undivided. This champion would wear the title of Everchosen, and his goal would be to bring doom to the world. In total, there were 13 Everchosen, 12 of which were failures, and one that would manage to accomplish the goal of the Chaos Gods. The last Everchosen would wear the name of Archaon, but before he was the Three-Eyed King, the Herald of the Apocalypse, and the Lord of the End Times, he went by a different name, that name being Dideric Kastner. There comes to the Emperor's shores, one knight driven before a storm, a gift in the guise of a child, unknowing, unknown, and unsought. From womb to sea he is returned, a victim of the churning surf, to be saved by a fisherman who sees the gift and not the curse, the error of the innocent. A commoner base-born and bred will never cost the land so dear, but put its people to the test. If murder comes more easily, or rude compassion shows its heel, then worlds old and new will be saved from the coming catastrophe. For despite early clemency and the God King's watchful gaze, the child finds its path to darkness and returns not man, but plague. The name of Archaon would be picked by Dideric, but one chosen by an evil power that wrote the end times. Be'lakor, the first damned and first among the demon princes, thrown away from the loving embrace of the Chaos Gods because of his deceit. Be'lakor was the first demon prince ever, and because of that, the Chaos Gods gifted him immense power if he would lead their respective armies. But he deceived them and left the realm of chaos with immense power to conquer the world. He would conquer the world with ease, as you can imagine, but his champions would be gifted demonhood by the Chaos Gods. Where once he was the first, now he was just one among the many. Of course, all the demon princes started to fight each other for supremacy, Be'lakor having his power drained with each new demon prince. And this is when the elves would create the vortex, and all the demons of the world, would be drawn back to the realm of chaos. Now, Be'lakor wanted to rule the world again, and he wanted to do it so much that he asked the gods for forgiveness. And they granted him something. He could come and go from the world without being summoned, which was a great boon, but the Chaos Gods knew not to trust him, so he could do that only when he had to crown an Everchosen, forced to be the advisor of the Chaos Champion. Each time he was summoned, he tried to break free of his shackles by possessing the body of the Everchosen, but he failed each time. Now his bet was on Archaon, a name picked when writing the end-time prophecy that is now attributed to Necrodomo the Insane, a servant of Be'lakor. The birth of Daedric happens after the present timeline of Warhammer the Old World, which is before Magnus the Pious becomes Emperor. In fact, it happens during the invasion of the 12th Everchosen in Kislev, Asvarkul. A warband of Vanks found their way to Northland, a region of the Empire. A woman named Victoria Rothschild was waiting with her 3 kids for her husband. But instead of the fisher husband, came the warbands of Vargs. They killed and butchered as they pleased. The bells of the church that signed the alarm rang, which comforted the woman, still in her hovel with her children. One Varg would come to their home, and while Victoria managed to put up a fight and stab the marauder through his chest, did nothing to stop him. When he went for her children, she offered her bedroom to him for their life. The marauder would take it, and as she laid on the bed and the marauder was prepared to satisfy his carnal pleasure, the husband of Victoria came in, Roland, and with courage stuck a big fishing hook through the skull of the marauder, killing him. He would take his children and wife and leave their home on the fishing boat. What, do you think the story just stops here? Don't you know? Legends are not made in this way. The Dark Master will not be thwarted thus. What is a prophecy if not a true promise to be? The skill is knowing where to exert force. It is true that with so many competing forces in the world, so many invested entities and powers, with so many destinies at odds, it is nigh but impossible to change the great happenings of the age. Any age, directly. There is a balance, except when there is not. With a lever long enough, however, I could balance it across the great mountains of the world's edge and prize mighty Morsleb from the sky. This world was once mine, a glorious ruin of ash and flame. It will be again, and so, like the pages of a book, flicked back to read again that which was missed the first time, I bring forth my instrument of destruction. He who is destined for Armageddon's crown. He whose anointed flesh is destined to be my own. Archaon will be. Small changes can make a big difference. Sometimes, all the difference. Which is why this time the shrine bells of Hagendorf never rang. Victoria stood on the beach, her belly and her legs raised. She had done this 3 times already. She could do it once more. If only the bells had rang, then her husband and the fisherman had come earlier. But it didn't, and they didn't, so she had to give herself to the marauder and bear his cursed gift, his child. The sea always provided for them, but the sea also took. Roland came to her, trying to stop her. The sky was dark and the water around Victoria was crimson. He tried to stop her, saying that the gods will punish her. She says they already did. And like that, the dark gift was taken by the depths, as a storm was coming, and Roland prayed. You would consign fate, crafted in flesh and blood, to the depths. The gifts of chaos are not to be refused. They are not demanded or earned. They are visited upon mortals at the pleasure of dark gods and the princes of ruin. This story cannot be untold. The will of demons cannot be undone. It is decided. Doom lives on. Damnation endures. From the darkness of the depths to the darkness of the womb, the gift shall be returned. And so I petition the moons and turn back the tide. The black depths reject that which has been rejected. Once more the fruit is swollen with the seed of doom. This child shall live, and in doing so, bring about the death of all the world. Consider this already done. Done in the name of God-thwarted Belacor. Victoria was giving birth. A midwife was coming to deliver the baby. It was strange to her after everything that had happened and, everything destroyed in their village, that they had made another child. Once she reached the house of the Rothschild, she saw everyone was serious and a little bit removed. Roland more so than others. We learned that Roland didn't come and saved his family during the Varg raid. The birth was difficult and the husband did come once the midwife needed help. By that time the baby was born. And the midwife found it strange that the mother of 3 should have such difficult time during birth. But it was what it was. Victoria started having convulsions immediately after birth. The midwife called for Roland to come and help her, and this is the time he came in. And this time he did. The husband and the 3 children kept the wife and mother down until her final breath. The baby was crying. The midwife wanted to leave them to grieve. But Roland told her to take the baby, or else he would let the sea have him. She then understood that their family was not as lucky as she first thought. She took the child with her. It was a full moon. The warp storm kind. She took the baby to a temple of Sigmar and left him there, thinking under Sigmar's gaze he would be protected. As she left, wolves came to eat the baby because he was crying. But he would be saved by the priest of the temple that was awoken by the baby's screams. 8 years later, the boy would be dying from a plague. There was nothing that could cure him, and the priest that saved him, Dagobert, held him close, gave him his silver hammer necklace, and apologized. The temples of Sigmar have vaults that contain heresy about the enemies of the God King, and the boy was sent after a book. Dagobert fears he might have caught an ancient disease left by one of the enemies there, and he apologizes. The boy says he forgives the priest, and after he says that he sees something in the shadow, the priest tells him is the God King and he should go to him. But the boy says in horror that is not the God King, as his last breath leaves his body. The Lord of all enjoys the song, the chanting of children at play, holding hands and dancing around. They sing of flowers, of his plagues that sweep through the land and the ashes of bodies burned. They celebrate this life of death, for he is both the cause of their suffering and he who would save them from it. He defines the time with pain, and fear he brings into mortal lives. Though they would not know it, they sing and dance to the tune of the great pestilence's calling. He takes so many souls in this way. Like the harvest, they are weighed and measured. They are his tithes, his reward for the architecture of agony that is his contribution to their mortal failing. Like the sight, the Lord of all does not choose between the one stalk and the other. With so many souls feeding his eternal appetite for affliction and end, he will not miss the one stalk. Does the mill miss the single grain? The bread bereft of flour that dusts the floor with his forgotten bounty? The mouth the crumb that falls from the lip? He will not miss the one soul unpromised to him, the one soul destined for more than his plague or pestilence. For this one grain replanted will yield a reaper's harvest, a celebration of death and suffering, the like of which the world has never known. He will be a scourge, a disease all of his own, a plague from which the world will never recover. And so I release this soul from its suffering and send it back so that it might be a worm in the rotting carcass of the world, and not a carcass in of itself. A few years later, he would grow to become a page of a squire for a Templar knight known as Kastner. He was proud to wear the silver hammer necklace given to him by Dagobert before he turned into a page, or became a page. Their master was a drunkard. That's what Kastner was. Can't help it. And once he was drunk, all fury let loose. Now, Diederic didn't think the Templar represented what Sigmar wanted. But he was a knight of the Order of the Twin-Tailed Orb, so it is what it is. The boy was taking care of the knight's horse, Oberon, and he liked that. He liked the horse. The knight tried to sleep with the innkeeper's daughter, but she refused him and left. So, in a drunkard's anger, he wanted to take the horse and go to Middelheim. The squire tried to stop him by telling him the horse isn't ready. He doesn't have its shoe on, and so on, hoping the knight would just pass out from the discussion. But he didn't, and he was prepared to beat his squire, who has suffered many abuses at the hand of his knight before. Remember that. So of course, the first thing the squire did was throw the blame on Diederic, who kinda got it. He understood why the squire did that. The knight wanted to make the squire punish the page, but the squire was crying. He just couldn't do it. The knight told the squire to pick either birch, belt, or braid. And Diederic just hit him with a hammer after that in the head. And he said he chose the hammer. The knight gets back his footing and it's a little bit wobbly. So he says very well, and he picks up the hammer and tries to hit Diederic. But Oberon, the horse, gets scared, and Diederic tries to calm him. But that doesn't really work because the horse thought Kastner was coming towards him with the hammer. And so the horse kind of goes a little bit crazy and kicks Diederic in the head and throws him into the stable wall. He felt a wetness on his face and the pain where his head used to be. Accident, chance, providence, doom. These are one and the same. How many heroes have been crafted of the misfortunes that befell them? But for the roll of a dice, the flip of a coin, or the turn of a card, they would be happy nothings to the world. All gods, those of light and of darkness, operate in the enormity of these mere moments. They are in the quiver of the string that sends the arrow wide, and the glance of the sword that fails to meet its mark. I have saved my pawn, my small piece in a larger game, from 100 such deaths. What is life but a journey of hapless mortals through the myriad dangers of their miserable existence? It is the tedious curse of princes such as I to watch the tangled deathbreaths of entwined lives from knots before me. Sometimes I cut the skin free, damning all to whom it is attached. To mortals, these are the battles, massacres, and disasters of the world, the labyrinthian circumstances into which the doomed have been inescapably placed. Sometimes, however, I take the time to unravel the threads of existence and free the living of their present doom. This I do when I have investment in the game. This I do for my pawn. I set him free knowing that he will similarly set me free of fate. Bonds no less intricate or inescapable. And so, my pawn, I release you from a death ordinary and unknown. You are meant for greater deeds. 2 years later in Drakewald, the page became the squire, and now 2 squires were looking for their wandering master, the drunkard knight Kastner. They were scared, but they broke that tension with a joke here and there. They discussed what would happen if their knight was dead. Diederic would go back to Father Dagobert, and the other squire had a plan. The knight had fostered many children, and his wife, hateful of his infidelity, uses part of their wealth to sponsor the bastards that come to her and want to become knights, and she grants them the name of Kastner. That was the plan of the second squire. They would find the knight at the bottom of a pit, and, well, the first squire wanted to just leave him there. But Diederic manages to convince him to help. Our hero goes down to the pit and sees that the knight lost his legs by some creatures that only lived in the darkness and were scared of the moonlight. At this point, the knight was going cuckoo, cuckoo from the blood loss, and he wasn't really sure where he was. Above the pit, Diederic can hear the squire trying to find something to use as a rope. Their plan was to lift the knight with the help of Oberon the horse. And then nothing. The horse started getting scared, and Diederic takes Terminus, the sword of the knight, and goes up. A fight with a bunch of goblin riders ensures, and our hero manages to win. But the knight and the other squire are dead, so he leaves with Oberon, the massive horse, and the sword, Terminus. 14 years later, now going by Kastner and having his own squire, Emil, they walk to the forest talking about the teachings of Sigmar. They had just killed a servant of chaos and discussed about why it's a good idea to burn him, to raise the morale of the people this abomination has terrorized. Near a river, they hear a baby scream. Emil goes to see what is it. It's a baby screaming by a river. That's not good. And then Emil screams back because the baby is a beastman. Kastner wants to kill it, but Emil has too much mercy, and they let the baby go down the river. But something happens. Emil is very shamed for letting an enemy of the Empire and Sigmar go, and they go down the river because they knew if they tracked the river, they would find more beastmen. So of course they find beastmen and they start fighting them. Emil gets injured at some point, and Kastner would do most of the heavy lifting, defeating the beastmen, and he would even hit the Hearthstone. They would also save a sister, or a young girl named Giselle, who got captured by the beastmen while carrying some books. Kastner sends her and the very injured Emil to follow Dagobert, who was a learned man that could help Emil with his injuries, and the sister to find out answers about her books. But we learned that she didn't need the answers. The books didn't have anything to tell her, but the books needed protection. Our hero rushes her to get there as fast as possible. Oh yeah, there's this flagellant named Gorst that always keeps following Kastner around, and he was there. So Kastner sends the flagellant with the sister and the squire, while he remains to destroy the rest of the beastmen and burn their bodies. And he does just that. Daedric is now lost. He wanders through a forest, but something wasn't just right. As it started raining, a lightning struck a tree and set it on fire. He wants to say the name of Sigmar, but he just can't. And then he asks his god why has he forsaken him. But a voice says he doesn't. It's a shadowy form with a horned head and wings. And this is how Kastner gets his first taste of chaos. Kastner clutched his head and let slip a scream of honest agony. He covered his eye, but the searing torment proceeded in the socket of the one that was no longer there. He could see lightning inside his mind, shards of color that defined names or description, ghostly impressions of a world beyond that of sense and sight. He could feel with his heart, listen with his mind. He could taste a world ripe for destruction. It was too much. It was all too much. Make it stop. Daedric, or Kastner, would reach Dagobert's temple. He was found by a farmer or a peasant. One thing I forgot to mention, and we kind of heard earlier, was that when he hit the herd stone, a shard of it just got out and pierced his eye. Yeah, a nun that was at the temple tried to pull out the piece from his eye, but he was strong-willed. He just wouldn't give up that easily. Giselle and Dagobert had to hold his head as the nun tried to pull out the stone from his eye. Of course, Kastner refusing to take anything that would dull his pain. At some point, he would stop moving. He was dead. Of Emil, his chances didn't look all that good either, and it was quite tragic. There are many who would mean you harm, shadow of mine. Many wretched gods and their misguided servants. The weakling god king of the empire, Ulrich of wolves and winter. Even the merciful maiden Shalaya, who would harm as much as she healed with her potions and instruments. They will cut you with their steel, they will burn you with their faith. You are claimed, shadow of mine. You are begotten of havoc, orphaned in a world you will destroy, baptized in the susceptibilities of your enemies. You have the attention of the dark gods. They look down on you as I do, with dread, with hope, with possibility. You cannot deny what you are, my gift to the world, flesh, bone, and the spirit that drives it on, a living doom. In order to realize your terrible purpose, however, you must live, my creation. Live, shadow of mine. The dark gods know you now. Show them what you can do. Give them a glimpse of the calamity to come. Daedric was in the wagon hospice that would take him and Emil to Altdorf. He couldn't move, but with one good eye he could still see. Next to him, Emil was in pain, and he did not make for a good traveling companion. Night fell at some point, and Dagobert and Giselle were around the fire, talking about the tomes the novice sister brought. Here we learn that her reverend mother from Hammerfall sent her with the tomes so a learned man can take them to the Grand Chapel of Altdorf, to the Grand Theologian. There was a letter in one of the books from the reverend mother, and there it said she had a vision of the God King who told her that a great darkness comes from the north. So she sent novice sisters to deliver the books. After this letter, we learned that 3 towns/cities have been destroyed by a northern horde. Of all the books the sister brought with her, the most dangerous was the Celestial Book of Divination, or the Liber Celestior, written by Battista Gaspar Necrodomo, who told of the prophecy of the end times. Normally, nobody except the Grand Theologian is allowed to read the book, but Dagobert looked through it during his journey, and there he learned the name of Archaon, the bringer of the apocalypse, the ever-chosen. And we also learned that the sister can't read. In the cart, poor Emil was in agony, and because the corruption of chaos is strange, he was turning into a chaos spawn right next to Castor. A most dangerous thing when you consider the knight couldn't move at that point. The knight tried to alert his allies, but he did not find the strength to move or yell. He even peed himself, which when you have a chaos spawn dog-like creature next to you, it is understandable. But a pitter-patter of the pee alerted the priest and the sister that the wounded needed their help. Somehow, Castor would find the strength in his body to move, but he found he was bound to chains. Luckily, so was the chaos spawn that was once Emil. The priest and the sister came to them, and Dagobert asked for the crossbow. Kastner then put the chaos spawn in a chokehold, which was very metal, and kept it there until the priest shot at the chaos spawn and ended poor Emil's pain once and for all. Kastner miraculously regained his strength, and he was now able to ride Oberon, his strength having returned to him. Of course, Dagobert was worried. He raised the man, and they have a nice exchange like father and son of sorts. The priest sent a runner, the theologian, before leaving to let him know of the damn book they were carrying. Their next stop would have been at a fort, and they reach it after the burning of the body that was once Emil. And we learned there that beastmen put weird teeth in their hounds so they can turn people into beastmen. Because of course, what I forgot to mention was that Emil was bitten by one of those hounds. Moving on, they reached the fort and it was in ruins. Everything was destroyed and the bodies lay dead on the cobblestone. Since recovering his strength, Kastner also seemed to have gotten heightened senses. This is only the beginning. He hears horse riders come to them. The priest and the sister hide in a burned chapel, and Kastner finds a proper place to hide, on his horse. What came here were the Knights of the Fiery Heart, an order of knights who were the personal guard of the Grand Theologian. The priest is glad to see them, and with the sister, they come out and greet them. The knights surround them. They talk a little, and we learn that the messenger that was sent by Dagobert was put on the rack and made to tell everything to the Grand Theologian. Which is funny, because Dagobert says the messenger was a mute. Excuse me. The knight wants the book. Dagobert tries to convince him that if the forces of the ruinous powers would do that to a fort for a book, they were kinda dangerous. The knight threatens Dagobert and Kastner comes out. There, the leader of the knights goes, Sieur Kastner, Diedrich Kastner of the Grubber Marches, Risen Whaler announced. By the order of Heinrich Lutzenklager, Grand Theologian in Sigmar's will in this world, you are charged with perfidy, wanton bloodshed, bringing terror to this land, the breach of your holy faith, concert with heretics, and the worship of outlawed gods. Of course, there is some confusion at this accusation. Kastner says he didn't do any of that, but the leader says, yet, which creates more confusion. But when spirits get heated and Kastner is ready to fight the knights, from the dead bodies around arise chaos knights with wings. Perfect. An all-out fight then begins. I say all out, but it's not really all out, because the chaos knights do fight the Imperial Knights. Kastner fights the Imperial Knights, but when he tries to fight the Chaos Knights, when he runs to them and tries to strike them with Terminus, they just flee. It's a strange situation. The fight is taxing for the Imperial Knights, but their leaders really want the book. He gets Dagobert and struggles with him to take the book. If you wonder why the knight leader struggles with the fat priest to take the book and he doesn't just stab him, Well, because this order of knights fights with warhammers, heavy two-handed weapons, which is metal, but very ineffective when you can only use one arm. Giselle would try to save the priest, but the leader would just throw her away. When it looked like everything was doomed, Giselle shot a bolt at the leader, and that ends him. What can you do? Kastner comes and takes the two religious fellows, and they run as fast as they can. The rest of the knights are busy fighting the Chaos Knights. By the time they deal with those Chaos Spawn, who numbered only 8 compared to the Imperial's 20, our group of heroes is already on the run, and Kastner decides on the proper place where they can rest. Home. The ancestral lands of Kastner, you can imagine, did not escape the wrath of Sigmar. The manor was destroyed and everybody in it killed. Kastner then started to dig graves for them. Giselle comes to make him stop, but since regaining his strength, Kastner just grew stronger. He asked the sister to bring Dagobert to give the last rites to those dead. Dagobert comes and tells Kastner to do it himself, since these were his people. They were people he knew. But the words did not come out of his throat. Dagobert went to the knight, and where the silver necklace of Sigmar stood, well, he moved it and saw that it left burn marks on the skin of the knight. We get some accusations of corruption. Kastner to the priest and the sister to the knight. A very intriguing drama. And Dagobert tells Kastner of what's in the book. Not an evil embedded like in other artifacts of chaos, but an evil in writing. A prophecy that is ongoing and coming to pass. The story of Archaon. Kastner doesn't believe this, but the more the priest talks, the more convinced he becomes. And certain signs are there. Because Kastner is Archaon. We already know this, but Dagobert tells him that, and it's quite of a shock. Kastner was truly born in the south, but every bit of him looks like a northerner. And it's all written in the book, them fleeing with it, a Templar falling to chaos. The book also contains something interesting, saying that while Archaon is the ever-chosen of chaos, he himself is being played by the dark gods. No more to blame than an animal caught in the hunter's trap, or poor Emil for the beast he had become. Of course, they have to deal with the idea that Kastner is Archaon, the bringer of the end times. But they can't be that sure because a page was missing from the book, the one that would reveal the identity of the Ever-Chosen. Which from all they could gather was in the hands of the Grand Theologian, especially with all the accusation his personal guard made towards Kastner. The only way to find out is to simply go there and take it. Diderik then leaves them. Dagobert and Giselle then start talking if he can make it back, and for the good of everyone, it would be better if he didn't. If he found his peace in the Temple of Sigmar. Will he return? No, Dagobert said. I seriously doubt it. Then why send your friend to his death? Giselle asked. I sent him because he is my friend, Dagobert said. I hope for his sake, and our own, that he does not return. That he finds peace in the God King's holy temple. Knight of Sigmar or not, Diderik is polluted. Dread forces twist his soul in the same way they twisted the flesh of poor Emil Eckhart. Dagobert's manner became grim and brooding. If he does indeed return, with dark answers to dark questions, well then, we shall all be doomed. Kastner crossed the pitch-black lawn, leading for the untruth of his ancestral home. He nodded slowly to himself, his head burning with unanswerable questions. His past was a lie. He knew that. But would his future be similarly false? The next morning, the sister can't find the knight, and while talking to the father, they conclude that maybe he's busy. He just wouldn't go to Altdorf without telling him, would he? Nevertheless, the sister goes to the well to get some water. But the bucket was already lowered and she couldn't raise it. It was stuck in something. The priest then comes and helps her. And initially they thought it might just be a root of a tree that grew too big. And they were pulling it out, the whole tree. But once they dragged the bucket up, they saw the body of Diedrich hanging on the rope. Dead. Pale. With black veins coming from his wounds. Sigmar's blood, Dagobert said. Sigmar's precious blood. What does it mean? Giselle said, her face still stricken with shock. It means I was wrong, Dagobert said. It means that destiny cannot be compressed like a dead flower between the pages of a heavy tome. It lives. It is untamed and ever-changing. Giselle saw tears roll down the priest's round cheeks. It was a tear of grim happiness rather than grief. It means, Dagobert said finally, that fate is what you make of it. But fate is not what you make of it, shadow of mine. Fate is as inescapable as I choose to make it. Your fate is tied to my own, and I will not let us fail. You cannot give away what isn't yours. Your soul may flee this mortal vessel at my command. When I am ready to assume the ever-chosen anointed's flesh, when I am once again ready to rule a world ripe for ruin, no coward's noose will deny me my eternity. You'd think it took an indomitable will to deny me? To flee your mortality and consign your flesh to corruption? No, shadow of mine. It takes an indomitable will to bend, nay, break the very laws of existence. It takes an indomitable will to wrestle the reins of runaway fate and yoke destiny that tramples even gods like a beast of my burdens. It takes an indomitable will to send you back to redress your failures and begin again, to live in ignorance and do my demon binding. My indomitable will. Daedric left the manor, and the armor of the great-great-grandfather Kastner that fought side by side with Magnus the Pious against chaos. The irony of that wasn't lost on the knight. He went as a stowaway on a ship, and once the crew found him, he jumped overboard. The armor dragged him down, but that was his plan, for he would enter Altdorf and the cathedral through the sewers, and he would manage to find them. It was dark, but he could see. Dark vision. That's what he has now. After some walking and some wall breaking, he would reach the cathedral and an unfortunate priest would find him. Now he wouldn't kill the priest, he would just knock him out. And then he would take the robes and go into the great chapel, where he stood in front of a statue of Sigmar, waiting for the grand theologian to come to his golden throne. The fate of Sigmar is an interesting one. They allow weapons in their temples because their god is a warrior god, but they're not that fond on disturbing meditations. So if somebody is praying, even if he stinks like he came from a sewer, nothing will happen. But anyway, everybody knows Kastner lost his fate here, in this moment. But here's how it happened, here are the details. You have forsaken me, Kastner hissed to himself, his dry lips pronouncing each word slowly within the confines of the hood. The Templar looked up at the statue's proud features. The statue gleamed its goldness, and from the low angle, Sigmar looked like a haughty and disdainful god. I have lived a devout existence, bare myself with study for your good grace, trained to my limits and served you through the sword. I have honored you, I have loved you, I have given you everything I have. Yet you have left me lost on a path to I know not where. The Templar was bathed in shafts of colored light from the stained glass window, and felt his harsh whispers rise on the heat of the morning sun. I am no longer an instrument of your design, Kastner said, a yardstick to measure the purity of others, a weapon for you to wield in punishment, and a shield to protect your empire from foes near and far. I am changing. I am changed. I know it. Circumstance has turned me from my purpose. in service of others unknown. Like the warped arrow, I fly on truth, yet hit the mark. I will not be a nothing in your eyes, a dog to be put down in the street. I am not an error, an aberration. I am not history to be rewritten. I am not a mistake to be corrected. Speak to me, my Lord, my Emperor of all, my God King. Show my heart the way, lead me back to your light and love. I did all in service of you. Like the arrow shaft, I can be softened and straightened. Like the imperfect blade, I can be reforged. I beg of you, my Lord, find use for me again. About Kastner, priests had started to gather for the morning observance. They stood in clusters, the daily business of cult politics dominating the conversation. The Templar even heard several speak of the Grand Theologian's mysterious orders and the extra security around the cathedral. Clusters became crowds as the numbers grew and the domed sanctuary filled with clerics standing before the colossal figure of their god. Still, they gave the stinking Templar a wide berth. Kastner rose to his feet. He felt sick to his stomach. His knees felt weak. Don't leave me, Kastner pleaded with his lord. The plating of fate, show me a sign in this place of all places. Anything, curse you. But nothing came. Kastner's lifetime of devotion and service was rewarded with a kind of monumental silence only a towering statue could deliver. As the priestly gathering hushed and parted, Heydrich Luchtschenger entered the grey sanctuary, in robes of glorious white and gold thread, which trailed behind the Grand Theologian for half the hall. The High Sigmarite made his way towards the throne. Luchtschenger was known as an ardent but cold servant of the God King, a puritanical and inflexible executor of his fate. His displeasure was easily earned. He wasn't a physically imposing man. He didn't need to be. The 6 knights of the Fiery Heart escorting him in were imposing enough, and the gliding of their god in silver plate carrying the lengths of hammer-crowning poleaxes and their glorious gauntlets. Luchtschenger's short step took him with business-like speed through the masses. With him hurried a small group of attendants, bearing the Grand Theologian's own ceremonial hammer, staff scepter, and rolled readings. Luchtschenger's head was shaved short, leaving a black shadow that almost gave the appearance of a skull cap, while his feathered brow framed hard eyes and a beaked nose. As the Grand Theologian made his long approach, Kastner glowered back up at the impassive mask of the Golden God. Pulling back his hood, he slipped his Crusader helm back over a snarl that threatened to split his face. You speak not, Kastner mouthed within the darkness of his helm, but I hear everything. Silence will be met with silence, God King. Nothing so singularly personifies the prayer unanswered as a God powerless to save his people. So be it. You will watch your worshippers suffer and die as I drag down your empire into the embers of Armageddon. You will hear me then, God King. You will hear me in the pleading prayers of your people, held under my blade. You will hear me in the ravenous fires that will eat all you have lived to build. You will hear me in the deafening silence of the end times, where I will leave your petty empire no world left to conquer. Though half blind, I see you for the fraud you have always been, the appealing ramblings of a mad friar. I renounce your false majesty and will forge a path of my own making. I will champion my undoing and accept allegiance of those that already answered the hatred in my heart. I do this out of hatred for you, my lord, out of hatred for all the fickle powers of this world who play at destiny with men's souls. With darkness lies a new beginning, as with me lies the end of man and all godkind. Yes, something dark and deep within him said. With a word, Kastner felt his heart suddenly thud within his chest. Like the unfastening of a lock, the heavy chains and shackles of his infirmity fell away. A dread potential had bloomed within the night. at once, allowing him to access all he once had been and the fearful doom he would one day become. Kastner savored the troubled birth of darkness within his soul. The feeling was new, it was exciting, and yet it had always been there, its moldering seed forever planted in his heart. He knew nothing of birth. It was lost to the darkness of ignorance. He had begotten by darkness, and to darkness he would return. The Templar allowed the cold rage to build within him, honing it like a blade on the eve of battle. It was time. We can talk about this section for a while, but it's better to just go on with the story. As the theologian walked to the throne, Daedric cut one of his guards in half. He killed the others and knocked out the theologian and put him on his throne. Knights came to fight him and save their holy leader, but he threatened them that if they don't leave, the theologian dies. They leave, of course, reluctantly, and the theologian wakes up. After some little torture, we learn what was missing on that page. You see, Archaon, or the one who will become the bringer of the end times, is not described in appearance. There was no specific hair color or birthmark, no name or place. The bringer of the apocalypse would be the only one to come looking for his name. The book predicted the page being torn. This hit Kastner hard. Apparently, it was all predicted: the fall of Hammerfall, the villages towards Altdorf being destroyed, him coming with the book, Daedric being the best member of his order. This outraged him. But of course, Daedric wanted to know what were the plans for the defense that he heard. Should Archaon come, the cathedral was ordered to be destroyed. Alongside him, thanks to the use of the big cannons in the city. That plus every other order and soldier in Altdorf coming to defeat him. Archaon threw his battle hammer towards the statue of Sigmar, destroying half of the statue's face, not before making one more denunciation of the God King. He went to kill the theologian. The cannons then started to roar and threw him to the ground. He didn't get to do that. By this point, the silver necklace was melted. His sword caught fire, thanks to the unholy corruption of the Knight, or the Dark Templar, should I say better. Nevertheless, even his helmet started to burn him. Knights came in and he slaughtered all of them. One Grandmaster tried to hit him with 2 hammers and kind of turn his head into a sandwich, but Daedric managed to kill him with his spiked helmet. The Grand Theologian or Theologus gets rescued and orders the cannon to be shot. Here's an important aspect. During the battle, he felt watched by dark, powerful beings that were judging him, but they were also interested in him. With each kill, he felt the dark gifts coursing through him get stronger. But at some point, there were too many enemies, and some managed to injure him. Remember those Chaos Knights on their horses with wings? Well, they came in and helped him fight them off, and rescued him. But even with those marauders there, the Knights were too much. So as I said, they take him and leave, and we are left with his final vision before falling to unconsciousness. His tense limbs slacked and his head slumped. As consciousness left him and obscurity crept in from the edges of his sight, like the ash of a ravaged wasteland claiming everything he could see, Kastner saw his homeland and Sigmar's empire darken. It was a vision he promised himself he would realize upon his doomed return. So the doom of man traveled north through forests and shadows cold, through lands of iron, spice and ice, through man-eating ogres and trolls. Bitter like winter's bite he was, with the God King's land at his back. His darkened heart beat to vengeance, echoing with questions unasked. A new path lay before the night, of way of blood and butchery, on which no sacred life was spared, and his dark patrons were appeased. Northern wastes and warriors met, where men's forlorn hopes go to die. Accepting he was damned and lost, to his gods he made sacrifice. Warriors of the empire dead, subjects of the god kings deceived, great warlord of the Shadowlands, of ruinous treasures received. Back to the manor, Dagobah was prepared to kill Kastner with a pistol, but he couldn't do it. The two talk to each other, and finally Archaon convinces him to come with him, as he becomes the ender of the world. Funnily enough, he mentions that he will not be a slave to the Dark Gods or the Pig God. The sister also came with them, mostly because Dagobah convinced her. As the swords of Archaon, the Chaos Knights that followed him, the 5 Chaos Knights protecting them were the jailers of the priest, as was the priest the jailer of the sister. The swords didn't talk, and they kinda looked the same. Archaon inscribed numbers on them to tell them apart. 1, 2, 3, I guess, whatever. Dagobah had the task of translating the Liber so that its prophecies might help them on their journey. And for all that, it helped. It announced the ambush of some Northmen. It helped them avoid the Chaos Dwarfs and the contested Karak. Everything was all fine and good. But Archaon wanted to know how one becomes the ever-chosen champion of Chaos. Dagobah started to refer to Archaon as master on this journey, and the priest, or former priest, told him that he needs to shed a lot of blood in the name of the gods, and that there are 6 treasures that he must find. 6 gifts of the dark gods. 2 he must earn. 2 he must steal. 1 he will find, and the last one will find him. Now Dagobah can't translate everything, because there are missing primers and keys that would make the translation possible. So, at this point he's doing guesswork. But what he could get is that the first treasure lies in the New World, and the land of murder, the realm of the Witch King. We get a short history of the Dark Elves, of how they lost the Civil War, and how they worship a murderous god who has nothing to do with chaos, and how they keep their dominion safe from chaos for thousands of years. Archaon mentions he killed elves before. Wood elves, but still elves. He promises to create a great host to conquer the land of the elves, take his prize, and sacrifice his army in the name of the dark gods. Archaon fought all manners of tribes and warriors on this road, born in the north or they were from other places. They fell to his sword like twigs, but he needed allies. That was a hard thing to find in the Chaos Wastes. Talking about the Chaos Wastes, this was a place where time had no meaning, as neither did any cardinal direction. When they moved in the direction that they presumed was correct, but only God knows if that was the one. Of the sister, Archaon hadn't heard anything. In the beginning, she looked at him like a man forced into destiny, with pity, but now she looked at him with hatred and contempt. She said nothing. She just stood there in silence, even when he tried to talk to her. Thanks to Dagobah, Archaon gets more insight to how one can serve all 4 masters, despite them all being opposed to each other. It looked contradictory to him, but Dagobah puts it, one must become a canvas to be painted and admired by all 4 of the Chaos Gods. Going back to Archaon and his allies, they would be unable to reach the altar of ultimate darkness, the first of the treasures of the Ever-Chosen, because the mother of the Witch King led a covenant of hags that would not only see them coming, but also detect their dark intent. So Archaon's plan was to hide their true intent through an invasion. And with that, he started to gather any mongrel, any damned soul that was willing to join. But like bad employees, he couldn't keep them for long. Some tried to betray Archaon, so they were killed. Others got turned into zombies thanks to a plague and just wandered out of his warband. Many died in battles. Capricious are the ways of the Chaos Gods. With all that, he would still be able to gather some men to fight under his banner. One such creature was a beastman devoted to Slaanesh and his war herd. They knew how to brew ale and how to sing, but as you can expect, singing goats aren't the most pleasant to the ear. But it beats nothing, I guess. Archaon and his swords would leave the warband in the hands of one of his lieutenants. The leader of that Slaaneshi warherd decided that while Archaon was out and the lieutenant was asleep from drinking, he would plunder the secrets that Archaon had hid from them. So they went to the wagon. The sister and the priest were still in that wagon. Sure, one horse had died at some point and had to be replaced with a rhino thing, but the wagon was still good. That's the story of the wagon, because I don't want to get to this part. But the beastman came in and saw the sister sleeping. So you can expect the most depraved thoughts ran through his damn head. But you know, when you sleep in the Chaos Wasteland, you don't sleep easily. You sleep with one eye open. This is the funny thing. The sister's contempt for Archaon grew, but her faith in Sigmar still burned. Something that made Archaon think on why he was still keeping her. Surrounded by the damned, she always slept with one eye open. When the beastman tried to grab her, she stabbed him with a shiv. The beastman didn't like this and changed his plans. And while Dagobert was being held by two other beastmen, and he threw insults and called for the help of the lieutenant, which was asleep, the beastman I guess, pulled out his club, prepared to eat the sister. As fate has it, Archaon came just in time and rescued them, sending the beastmen to the cannibal ogre, the Great Spleen, and his tribe of corn worshippers. The sister would call Archaon damn names because he was damned, and he would leave her a knife to protect herself, because to him, her fate wouldn't be enough. So what does Giselle do? Well, some time passes and she looks at the sleeping father, holding tight to the lever, and she wonders if her implications in the story and what she will do next is written down there. So she leaves the wagon and sees the lieutenant skewered in his own javelins. You can imagine a punishment for being drunk and not protecting the two. The sister goes to the tent of Archaon and prepares her dagger. But Archaon was there in the shadow and not on his bed, and asks why did she come. She responds to save him, and the struggle happens where she manages to cut him a little, but gets herself thrown to the bed, having her arms being held by the Everchosen. He then rips her dirty clothes, and on her naked body he sees the symbol of Sigmar still at her neck. And then the Everchosen goes through a crisis, one that sees him fall on the chest of the sister and fall asleep. First, the sister goes through her own crisis. She went to save the world, but now she has brought damnation on herself. But as the Everchosen fell asleep, so did she finally, and with some semblance of hope. Archaon woke up from a dream. He had blood on his neck from a nick. The new tradition he and the sister shared was for her to try and kill him, fail, try to kill herself, and then stop. It's implied that they have sex, but that ends quickly as the sister's blood grows cold and Archaon leaves before she can say something. But it is implied that they share one nice moment, like man and wife, like a loving moment, but then the reality just hits them. During his time in the Waste, he learned how to use magic and the Eastern arts of fighting in hand-to-hand combat. The host of the Bringer of the End Times has grown in size since the last time, having many followers dedicated to chaos as a whole, and some specific worshippers. Of course, the cannibalistic corn ogre, the Great Spleen, two Kislevite brothers that are fused together to make an even stronger mage, a brooding mother dedicated to Nurgle that births male soldiers like an insect, and a dark elf slaver turned to Slaanesh, and of course, the second in command of the Everchosen. This dark elf was named Vayne, and he has an interesting story. He and his lever witch and their men were transporting cargo on their ship, the Citadel of Spite, but a storm threw them in the Chaos Wastes and they couldn't find their ship, so they wandered the wastes for 200 years. Vayne, his lever, Suchi, and Dagobert, alongside the swords, came to the Everchosen. In front of them was the altar that he was looking for, inside the structure that was the Citadel of Spite. Archaon never told the Dark Elf that he planned to sacrifice everyone in his army, including him, to get the altar. But to get it was a bit of a problem. Dark Elves were there, and fighting them was the son of Valkia the Bloody, consort of Khorne, Gorath. They had a bad history with Gorath. Archaon's army always retreated when fighting Gorath, and as fate has it, they made Gorath and his host a lot. The warriors of Gorath and he himself felt more like blood-driven machines, clockwork creations, instead of chaos warriors like the rest. Doubt hung over the present. This could mean another failure, as Gorath tried to usurp Archaon as the Ever-Chosen of Chaos. But Archaon found a solution. They would fight both the elves and the blood-crazy warriors by attacking them from above. Vayne hoped this wouldn't be the great plan, this wouldn't be all, just attacking from above. But Dagobert, who had insanity in his eyes at this point, told him that sometimes you need to have faith. The fight between Gorath and the Dark Elves was fierce. Archaon joined the battle, but without the full might of his army. No, you see, a part of it were to remain at the tree lines, observing the battle on the frozen waste. If you thought the plan was to unfreeze the water and have all the combatants drowned in the Black Sea they were fighting on, you would be correct, because they were. Some more fighting, Gorath dies, the Dark Elves have a witch on a dragon, one Dark Elf assassin stabs at Archaon, but the Dark Elf doesn't live much after that. The Ever-Chosen then takes his horse to the ship of Vayne, and there he entered with a horse. Technically, the horse was kinda outside, but you know. It's a big ship. As Vayne had told him, there were monsters on the ship, prepared to be unleashed in sea battles. The ship was big enough that it could float, despite having bedrock in its structure. Anyway, beasts from the ship's labyrinth came towards Archaon, and he killed them, but one managed to kill Oberon, his horse. The horse he had loved since he was a page. Archaon would feel sorry for the horse, who was now half lizard-like, because chaos, and he would leave for the altar. Former slaves of the Dark Elves and Dark Elf Corsairs still stuck on the ship had become corrupted by the altar of ultimate darkness, and they came for the Ever-Chosen's neck. After those were killed in the front of the altar, now Archaon stood unchallenged. 4 bolts of lightning would hit his body, burning all his hair, and he would survive and present himself to his cheering warband. Moving on the Citadel of Spite, Archaon would become infamous on the Eastern Sea, hunted by the Dragon Emperor, Ind, Nippon, and many other nations and pirates that wanted his head. But with all that, he could not find the next treasure. He sent captains far and wide, and many brought little back or barely their lives. Dagobert wasn't much of a help either. The priest was going insane and back. Archaon wanted to throw him and his book overboard when listening to his dumb comparisons and his, answers that don't give any answer. But Giselle was there to calm the Ever-Chosen. The Lord of the Warband would be lost to them when he would go out with a newly recruited flotilla of Manchu to fight a ship of Clan Eshin. The sea turned into an abattoir. This Vayne knew would be his chance. The Citadel continued sailing after the battle was done, and on the Skaven ship, secluded, Vayne and his lover would find Archaon, covered in the gore of the Ratmen and his own. Vayne would whisper into the ear of the Ever-Chosen. The Dark Elves poisoned Archaon, but not through his food or wine, but through the shaft of his sword, a poison that corrupted the soul. While Archaon was busy killing his enemies, the poison would slip forward and turn into the air, and then, that's how they got him. Archaon was now on the ground, laying in ecstasy and pain at the same time, unaware of what was happening around him. Vayne would stab at his heart, then proceed to copulate with his lover on the gore next to the dying body of Archaon. Perhaps I chose unwisely. There is time. There is time before the end. To start again, to twist the destinies of men unborn and create calamities of my own making. Perhaps the failure is in my blood, forever to repeat itself. Ambition that is blind unto itself, treachery, murder, the service of the ruinous powers accomplished through the service of the self? The dark nectar of the gods. But in whose service is my pawn? My gods? My demon need? Doom, plain and simple it seems. His own, and the doom of all else. What kind of corruption is this? What kind of perversity? Nothing I slipped into the ripe fruit of his soul. No blessing he was given by my abysmal overlords. Not my patrons. Not my princely foes. It is a kind of mortal madness. What kind of man lives not for the gifts of greed, for power, for supremacy and eternity? What kind of man exists only to end all other forms of existence? Cannot a man's future be corralled? Must it buck the saddle, the chains and the halters of fate? This soul must be tamed, but not by me. As we all come to learn, the best lessons are those taught to us by our enemies. Archaon would wake up in the depths of the citadel, covered in blood. An old hunched man stands before him. Of course, Archaon wants answers, and he will get them. The ancient is a sorcerer of Tzeentch by the name of Shirian, whatever. All the single chaos worshippers have turned against Archaon, and those most loyal to him have been imprisoned. The brothers, those two guys stuck together of Tzeentch, asked Tzeentch for the ritual to summon a great warp beast. But as the plans of Tzeentch are ever changing, now they are dead. But the sorcerer was sent to give them the incantation for that. And we learn a few things here. For example, that the Great Spleen, the ogre Cornite, has visited the altar of ultimate darkness in his sleep. The Nurgle Bug Lady had been taking energies from the Everchosen for years and spawned something resembling him to lead the host. And Vayne? Well, Vayne still serves the Hag Queen and is taking the altar to her. Archaon also gets a hint of the intervention of Be'lakor, of bringing him back to life. Before all this, the sorcerer also tells him that the treasure he is looking for is an island that is below and above the heavens. Prophecies are never clear, and that's why they come true or don't. The beast that the twins or the brothers were trying to summon was named Flamefang, a beast that terrorized Katai for a long time. Archaon then prepares to leave to take his vengeance upon his traitors and those that have failed him. He also asks the sorcerer to use the incantation to summon Flamefang. The sorcerer asks if he would bring the storm of change upon the world, and he replied that he would. The spawn of the North, ancient from the clouds of impending, a thunderbolt in flesh from angry skies like death descending, detested of claws, of jaw, of scale, of flame, it is nature's bane, hunting the lesser races, across ocean and waste, ever at change. It is the very form of our darkest fears, and like nightmarish visions in the heavens, it appears. Archaon stood over a dead copy of himself, killed by Vayne, but spawned by the bug lady whose name was Mother Festus or something, I think. He would put on his armor and his sword, and he would go after Vayne. On the ship, there was a civil war being fought, and all warbands that were once under his control just butchered each other. To make matters worse, Flamefang was summoned, and he was rampaging, killing indiscriminately, friend or foe. The Chaos Dragon was, an interesting beast that did not really care about what was happening, as long as it could get its, shall I say, part of the devastation. Archaon would kill the men that had once fought under him and who would have given their lives for him. But his target was still Vayne, who planned to bring the altar to his skin. During the ensuing chaos, Archaon would come face to face with Vayne and Suri. but Vane held the priest and the sisters as prisoners. Suri would try to seduce Archaon and kill him, but the Ever-Chosen woke up and used her own knife to cut her head off. Once the witch was dead, the whole ship started to break apart. The Chaos Dragon did eat Giselle and a few others, including the Chaos Sorcerer. They had unleashed it. It did not care for loyalty. Dagobert would be saved and thrown into the water, but the dragon used his flame breath to burn him alive. Archaon would find himself in the water as well, and the dragon was coming for him, with an open jaw. He raised his sword, but a voice said no, and then he lowered it and disappeared into the darkness of the dragon. "No," said Archaon, though his lips spoke not. His tormented spirit ached for release. "No," said the Dark Master, his words echoing through eternity. "You are a slave to Shadow. You are the Prince of Calamity. You are the future, my son. You are my future." "I am an end to all futures," Archaon roared at the reasoning darkness. "Yes, you are. All futures. Thing of dread that stalks my soul," Archaon told it. "My will is my own. My destiny cannot be held in the pages of a damned tome. My soul will not be crushed in the claw of some demon or dark god. Whatever you need to tell yourself. This flesh will never be yours," Archaon told the darkness. "This soul will rally against your bidding. You will come to regret the day you chose me, horror." "You were not chosen, Archaon," the Dark Master ragged, scorching him with every word. "You were never chosen. You were sired on the world so that I might end it. And end it I shall, Archaon. End it I shall. Return to embrace your destiny." Archaon heard the word no, so he lunged into the dragon's mouth, and from its twisted mouth he fought to not be swollen and started stabbing it with the terminus, injuring the Chaos Dragon. After that he fell in the water and looked for a place to warm himself. 3 marauders were on a scrap of wood. Archaon swam to it and told them to leave. They needed a little convincing though, and you can expect how that goes with Chaos Warriors. Archaon would make a raft out of the wood he was on and the dead bodies floating in the water. He even found one of his swords, one of those Chaos Warriors, and he was floating in the water. He was alive, but suffering from the effects of the mutative fire that struck him from the Chaos Dragon. If you're wondering what happened to the rest, well, the dragon took care of that. Days would turn to weeks as they drifted. Archaon would drink water from the ice gathering on the raft, and would eat the bodies of his dead men. Yep. After a while, they would find a frozen land that was similar to the Northern Waste, but somehow was different. Archaon laughed as he realized he reached the Southern Wasteland. The sorcerer said that the island he was looking for was at the Black Meridian. And here he was. There beastmen awaited, bigger and more frightening than anything in the north. Beast fiends. They went to eat the floating corpses that came with the raft. Archaon moved out of there as fast as he could, not willing to become part of the fiend's dinner. Since this is the Chaos Waste, of course volcanoes were erupting in the cold, and the lava just went on without anything stopping it. Guess what else happened? The Chaos Dragon appeared, and after many strikes, runs, dodges, the sacrifice of the sword, beast fiends, Archaon cutting 2 of his own fingers because they started to mutate, the dragon was defeated, but not killed. Archaon would manage to be away from it, but the dragon was still out there. But all that fighting had a purpose. All that fighting drove him closer to his prize, the end of the Black Meridian. Archaon lowered himself into the volcano. There he passed graves, and he could hear echoes of battles and screams. While he continued walking, he found a black island in the middle of the volcano lava. It was the tomb of Morak the Uniter, the first ever chosen of the ruinous powers, defeated by the God King Sigmar himself. Archaon realized his armor was the gift, and he put it on, plate by plate. Moorcock's helmet had 3 eye sockets. One made perfectly for a gem, and as you can imagine, Archaon knew it. But the third one was made for the eye gemstone of the sorcerer of Tzeentch, Shirian. The stone was the body of the Chaos Dragon. A cruel twist of fate, a joke from the Chaos Gods. Archaon cursed their names, but realized that with this armor, he could properly defeat the Chaos Dragon and take the eye from it. He put on the helmet, and then he started to hear voices, echoes of battle. And as you can imagine, it was just like before. A voice appeared behind him, calling him a worm, a scavenger, and it's Moorcock. Of course, they fight, and visions of Sigmar start to appear in front of Archaon as he wins. But it doesn't matter. Then Archaon wants to fight the Chaos Dragon, and the Chaos Dragon is not wasting time anymore, drenching him in purple warp flame. That kind of flame that always changes the body it burns. But Archaon came out of it unharmed. This went on a few tries before the Everchosen threw himself into the dragon's maw again. But this time, it would kill the beast from inside. There, Archaon found the sword Terminus as he started to make his way into the beast to find the jewel he needed for his helmet. The armor made him invulnerable, and he made his way into the womb of the dragon, where the eye was located. And guess what else was there? Eggs. Dragon's eggs that started to hatch from all the pain that Archaon caused inside the dragon. Of course, all the baby dragons would find their end, and he would meet the jewel he needed. Interesting aspect. In the womb of the dragon, he found Giselle and many others, including his swords, stuck to the flesh of the dragon. Yeah. Giselle asked for Archaon to kill her. Her voice still burned him, but he refused. When he realized he just can't cut her out, he told the demon Shirian that now he served him, and he better do good enough to break the spell and say the incantation that would send the dragon back. Since there was no other option, and, the sorcerer agreed. The dragon crashed, and everybody from its belly was now free. Yes, including the swords of Archaon. The swords would fight the beast fins as they closed on them, but they wouldn't fight to defend the rest of the men that were there, those that the dragon had eaten on the ship. Those were left to their own doom, because Archaon only cared about Giselle. Shirian was now the slave sorcerer of the Everchosen, because both of them were betrayed, and now they were taking their leave. As he led the swords and his slave sorcerer out into the stormy maelstrom of the southern wastes, with the girl Giselle in his arms, Archaon found his progress unimpeded. The savage beast fins through which he would have had to hack were swarming the bounty the warrior had left behind. He heard the crunch of bone on the wind, the slurp and flesh tearing of muzzles buried in bodies. He heard the screams of men and beasts being eaten alive. Archaon could think of no fate better for the champions of chaos and marauder tribesmen that had failed him. In the swirling havoc ahead, Archaon sensed the prodigious stalking of demons in the furious darkness. He slowed to a stop. "Don't," he warned them, calling into the storm. "Just don't." As Archaon walked on, he could not know it, but the demons of the southern wastes were parting to clear the Chaos Warlord's dark path. After that, Giselle would be left on a hot rock and covered in furs to warm herself. Protected, of course, by the swords. Remember who survived? No, you don't, because you have no idea who survived the whole ordeal of the Beast Fiends. Gorst, because Gorst also got eaten. And the flagellant followed Archaon through the wastes, including the whole ice thing. Anyway, here he was. Shirian and Archaon discuss about where they are and what they should do next. Here, Archaon learns that they could travel using the collapsed gateways, and he learns of Be'lakor, who has been stalking him for a lot of time, and also of the fact that Be'lakor could be anyone at any time. Two important things that need to be mentioned now is that during these events, Archaon talks about bringing the end of mortals and gods, which feels like an element many people do not talk about when discussing Archaon. His hatred of capricious and silent gods. The other thing is that he also has crisis whenever near Giselle. His humanity shines through even in his corrupted state, an important sign of how strong her faith really is. Hell, at some point he even considers her one of the few souls in this world to be innocent. He does that consideration while he is trying to find a way to get her out of the Chaos Dragon.